Hey everybody, Mike and I over there are quilting in the nude today. Well, actually quilting with Strictly Nude, the beautiful new Cotton Couture high density solid bundle from Miller Fabrics. Let's get started. Okay, and as fun as that might be, I don't think that's for today's show. Quilting in the nude may be the last time this show would ever be viewed. Afraid the table's just not tall enough to keep all you... we'll just stop. So anyways, everybody, welcome back to another great episode of Making It Fun. I am your host for Miller Fabrics, Rob Appell. My good buddy Mike is here, and we are super excited to be playing with our fantastic new fat quarter bundle called Strictly Nude. Let me just... Whoa, hey Mike, I better not grab that one, right? Let's take this one from down here. This is Cotton Couture, and if you're not aware, Cotton Couture is a very high density solid fabric from Miller. Been around for years. It is absolutely wonderful. Comes in like 230 some colors, I believe. I'm supposed to know this information. Anyways, 21 new pieces. We wanted to do what we kind of consider to be skin tones. That's why we're calling it Strictly Nude, to be fun. We wanted to have a big variety, and even better than that, I wanted to take today, utilizing this fantastic bundle that just started shipping out to the shops. And not only do we have the bundles, but you can also see here on our cool sell sheet that we had some rolls, we have some squares, we have all kinds of different stuff. And of course, we're always featuring some very, very cool projects out there that are sometimes free. Sometimes you purchase them at your local quilt shops. And today's project is one from a very, very dear friend of mine, Susan Emory. This is the Rosette Quilt. Check it out right here. It was originally done in primary colors or primary-ish colors. On a white solid Cotton Couture background, and I just wanted to change up the pattern a bunch. So Marilyn, go grab Susan and let her know this video is for her. And we're going to focus right now on the Rosettes Pattern by Susan Emory, a free pattern on the Miller Fabrics website under the Get Inspired free downloads. You can print this all out. It's got beautiful step-by-step instructions, cutting info, and all of that. And like I said, they originally just used a few of the primary style colors of the Cotton Couture, but being that the actual project has 6 individual blocks, and if we did 3 colors in each block, that's 18, and we had 21, but I wanted to do it on the black background or the black neutral fabric there. So really, we're using 18 colors from the fat quarter bundle, and I took them just as I got them from the shop here. Just as I got them right off my bundle, take the ribbon off. Now, if you've seen my trunk shows, you know I do not recommend untying the ribbon. But for this situation, you're going to have to. So untie that ribbon, and then I just took 3 at a time, and I just rotated them out, as you can see, and I broke these down, and each group of 3 becomes a color bank for the quilt. Now, I digitally rendered this first, so I'm going to put on the design wall right now. Here you go. My example, and this example shows 18 of the 21 colors being used from lightest to darkest in the order that you see them right here again in the bundle. So it's very easy to follow along. I'm going to teach you how to construct the pattern, and this construction is fantastic, and it goes for any way you're colorizing this, whether it's a single color on a background or multiple colors in the block. And if you're concerned about that curved section right now, don't worry, it couldn't be easier, if you know what I'm talking about. So let's dive right in. I'm going to walk us through. We're in the mid-tones right now on our blocks, and let's just have the instructions handy, because like I said, you can print them out, and I'd like you to print them out. And so I'm just kind of looking in this area, and we're starting building these small sub portions that we call flying geese, which is a rectangle with 2 squares connected to them. And so in this particular pattern, we're going to need 4 for each color block. These rectangles we're starting with are 3 inches by 5.5 inches, and our squares that we have are 3 inches square. You need 8 of them for the color. And if you look at the wall, what we're building is this section out here right now, right? These are the flying geese. We're going to build this in the middle, but color-wise, I should have started there. This was my light, then my medium, then my dark per 3 fabric groupings, or top, middle, bottom, because they're not always light to dark when you break them into your 3 colors, if that helps. So basically starting first color here, but we're starting here in the construction, and I think I probably just confused all of you. Maybe I should take all the clothes off. No, sorry. All right. So anyways, we're going to take our 3" by 5.5" rectangle. I have pre-drawn with a chalk pencil on the back side of this a sewing line. This is not a guideline today. This is a sewing line. And so we're going to sew on to the half square triangle, drop in the presser foot. We're technically creating a 1/4" seam allowance, but right now we're going right down that chalk line. And we've got a bunch of these to do. And I'm just kind of bringing you into the project with me. Like I said, I started digitally developing this. And so right now I'm going to chain piece these pieces, the first half. There's 4 of them, like I said, to begin with. So in order to do that, we're going to sew 1 square to 1 rectangle each, because we have to get to this first step on all 4 before we can go to the next step. So again, taking my rectangle, lining up my square, edge to edge, very common way we make flying geese. I'm just letting the sewing machine follow, looking through the presser foot at that chalk line. And my last one here. Do make sure your squares stay lined up to your rectangles. That's the key to this, having all those corners lined up nice, and then just stitch it on through. Very easy this way. We're going to cut that thread. We get the foot off the fabric, and I'm just using the thread cutter on the machine to cut open what were the chain pieced pieces. So we're going to have 4 of these things looking something like this. Let's make them all organized looking. Here, here, and here, all on the same side. I'm going to heat up an iron, and I'm going to grab a rotary cutter and a ruler. Ruler to protect my hands. It's not necessary, but we're going to give ourselves pretty much a 1/4" seam allowance. Okay, slow down. This is going to be the inside of the block. This is the part we want. So we're cutting off the outside, the other side of the line with that 1/4" mark. So I'm dropping a 1/4" here, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut that. I'm not going to save those for later. You could if you wanted to. They're both the same size. They could be sewn back into, make a little half square triangle. We're just going to trim off, and then we're going to press all 4 of these to begin with. As I get to the ironing board, I'm just going to basically press into the square, because you might be using the white background fabric. So I don't want to say light or dark today. I'm just going to go from the rectangle into the square. That's what that looks like there. And we do need to do the trimming of the first square once it's on the rectangle, and the pressing so that we can then line up the second square. You've seen me do this before, and if not, welcome to the videos, everybody, but I've probably done this in every video. So at any rate, we are now building a V shape, or a point, or a triangle top. So these are coming together. So you're going to look at this line, you're going to look at this line, make sure they're not running like this, but they're running like this, and we're happy as can be. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same exact style of chain piecing, all 4 at once, from corner to corner. And I'm just kind of got my finger on these fabrics to just make sure nothing shifts up at the top. And again, after you have enough made for the blocks you're doing, we're just going to chain piece those, chain cut these open, something like that. And again, coming back to our cutting table, we now are going to, this is our good working spot, right? So I need to cut off this outside just the same with that 1/4". And we'll go ahead and press those over just like we did. And the the flying geese units are set. There's 4 for every block. And as a reminder, in my version of Susan Emory's Rosette pattern, I am changing the parts and pieces to feature 3 colors per each block unit so that we can show off more and more of the super beautiful, strictly nude colors of our cotton couture. And I think I stalled just long enough to get these over here, press them over. And because we're following the instructions to the T, to the letter, we are not going to sew on the other portion of these. We do have some other rectangles that are 4.5 by 5.5 inches. I hope I said these rectangles were 3 inches by 5.5. I might have said 3 by 5, but these were originally 5.5 too, I believe. So now you're going to end up in the long run, we're going to put these together and I will do that with you, but it's not that step yet. So that's what those go to. The next step in the instructions is building the very center of the block. That's this one, which is going to feature a 5.5 inch square. And we're going to need 4 of the same color squares, 3 inches again, also diagonal lines already drawn on all of those. And we're just going to start doing the exact same thing we did for our flying geese, but we're going to sew onto opposite corners to allow for efficiency and trimming and sewing on the other pieces. So I'm going to do one on this side and one on the opposite side, but I don't do them at the same time. I will, however, just rotate this block at the bed of the machine here, drop this other square on here, and at this point do make sure that those lines are running parallel to each other, running along the same tracks there. And again, just making sure that all your corners are lining up on the squares nice and everything, so on through. And like with our rectangles, we are going to go ahead and trim and then press. And that just gets those corners over so nice so that our patchwork is pretty dang precise when we're all finished up. So now I'm going to press away from center or pressing into what were small squares from the big square. You may even be able to see it like that on the back side. And once again, we're going to flip these. We're now making points or perpendicular lines. So I'm going to drop this in and it should be running across everything. And I'm going to sew on one square on this corner and then the opposite, just like I did a second ago. And that'll look like that before we trim it down, right? So go ahead and 1/4 inch trim off the outside corners. Very, very fun and simple block to make, right? So we're going to do this. I'm going to press this over like that. So this technically, I believe, becomes another 5.5 inch square. Okay, and that is the center unit of the block. And everything else is basically done for the piecing. The patchwork is over. You're like, Rob, what about these terrible curved patches we were gonna make? We're not gonna patch them. Yeah, stick with me, we're almost there. Almost there. First, we're gonna assemble. Okay, so here's our destructions. Did I say destructions? I did, no. Sorry, Susan, I couldn't resist. Okay, so here they are. You can see they're gonna go together very nicely. And I jumped in and didn't look at all of the math and I got a little pre-cut with my sizes and strips and things on my black. So these outer squares are 7 inches, okay? So we're gonna build this all together real quick, but let's just start by the layout from our center. And from our center, we're gonna go with those rectangles that are 4.5 by 5.5. And then on either side is going to come the flying geese units, right? And the flying geese units are going to point away from center on either side. So this technically is the first row I like to build, and I'm going to build it as I go all the way across here. So I'm just going to fold this over, lining up that outside edge there. And then as I go into the sewing machine, watch this trick for really nice points. I'm going to go ahead and line up at the top here. And as I begin sewing through, I might need to adjust my fabric a little bit, make sure everything fits nice, which is fine. And I'm going to shoot for this point right here with my thread. So I'm sewing through on a way that I can see what's going on. And I want my thread to basically hit right on that point if I can, or just one thread below that point. Because that way when I press it open later, it's going to make for a really nice 1/4 inch seam and show that point right in there like that. Okay? You can do the same thing over on this side as you go through. So you would flip it over so you can see your point there. I'm just going to go ahead and sew on now just the rectangle itself, but I still am concerned about my points looking sharp. So I'm going to flip it again. If you get going a little quick, make sure you don't accidentally rotate this in. You're really never sewing this black rectangle to the black. It's always going to be sewing to the print or the strictly nude colors of the cotton couture there. Now, while I'm clearing off this section so we can build the rest, I'm just going to take a moment and press. And for pressing on these, I'm basically going to press from the patchwork into the solid fabric because it just makes my life so much easier. So from the patchwork into the solid. There are some instructions on which directions to press, and they're actually saying the same thing there on the instructions, but for a different reason, and that's what we call nesting seams. And if you don't know what nesting seams is referring to, I did a video a couple of weeks back, but you can always get to any of the videos. Please make sure you're subscribed at the channel, and you can check any of those out. Well, even if you're not subscribed for that matter, really, but do make sure you're checking out the nesting seams video. I think it's really important, and it will help us all a lot in our accuracy. We do have 4 of these units to make. 4 of the half square triangle, excuse me, these were called flying geese with that open space rectangle on there. So I'm gonna make these other 2 right now. And again, it's gonna sew the solid or the black up against the patchwork. So let's just make these last 2 pieces so we can assemble the rest of our block. So with these additional 2 flying geese combos done, again, I'm going to press from the patches into the solids. And the only other thing we really should be aware of orientation-wise on this one is that it looked like we are kind of sewing them, I'm going to call them vertically, and now they're going to be horizontally or sandwiched slightly differently between the pieces of solid black, which are now these 7-inch squares, okay? So we're going to take this here and we're going to put it between 2 of these larger 7-inch squares like this, and we'll do the same for the other side. These are going to be straight seams, and because I'm not really worrying about overlapping, I'm going to sew on one and then the other, but I will sew from this side just to make sure I'm monitoring all of my patchwork real nice. There's no seam allowance that we're really watching for on this side like a point, but it just helps sometimes when I've got a lot of bolt going in a lot of different directions. Just going to take a brief moment and press these, pressing them basically into the big solid 7-inch squares at this point. Again, just because it's easiest. And now we're going to simply assemble our whole quilt block base. And I think you're still concerned we forgot these curved pieces, but I haven't forgotten about them. I've got them right here, and now maybe you're seeing how it's going to all come together. Pretty dang cool. So just don't get so excited that you accidentally sew your flying geese here. It doesn't go like that. It goes way out here on these opposite corners, and we're going to go ahead and just match up these outside corners real quick. Also take a moment and match up those center seams, and we're going to go ahead and put this together real nice and fast, and then press it open to create, I think it's an 18-inch square at this point. Okay, so now the whole block is constructed, right? I'm going to take a second though, and I'm going to press it, and now I'm going to kind of leave it in this space because I'm going to need to work everything else on the ironing board, because that's right, these curves are appliques, folks. It's so easy, but I do need to walk you through on the pattern how to make this happen, and I'll even show you how to cut and place them. So I'm just taking a quick moment. I want this just to press out as nice and flat as possible because I'm just going to use this right in place, right where it is, making sure that we're ready to rock and roll. And also, I'm going to prep my iron now, making sure that it's not set for steam. I want it to be nice and hot. And what we're going to do is, getting a little ahead of myself, let's go back to our pattern pages, everybody. So you've got all these wonderful pattern pages you printed out. And you've seen this before, and it doesn't always work the first time. So I want to point out, you need to generally print your pattern, at least the last page, at 100%, because this is an applique shape. And if you don't print it at the right size, it's not going to fit appropriately from point to point there. So what I did is I just printed out the pattern originally, and then you take a ruler. There's going to be a 1-inch measuring guide there. And when I laid my ruler, let me see if I can find you a good square, you can hopefully see that the 1-inch square on the scale was not correct. So then I went back to my printer and I noticed my settings were set to scale or print to scale to fit the page versus 100%. So I printed it at 100%. The number at the bottom got a little chopped up, but then when I lay my ruler on here, no matter where I place it, it's a perfect 1-inch. And now that it's a perfect 1-inch, I could trace my shapes, and I need 4 per block. I trace them onto a fusible web. I prefer the Heat and Bond Featherlight because I love the way it works. Once I traced all my shapes on, then you want to cut out with a little bit of a perimeter. You do not want to cut on the line until it's already on the fabric like this, right? So now what I'm going to do real quick is put this piece on the fabric so we can cut them out and do them. You want to make sure that your, here, we can do this right here for everybody to see. We want to make sure that our fabric is only on, or excuse me, the fusible web is only on the fabric. We don't want to accidentally damage our ironing board. So everything fits nice. I have a dry iron, nice and hot, a few seconds to bond, about 3 seconds with Heat and Bond Featherlight. Just like that, that's plenty. And then a couple years back, you've heard me talk about, I've invented this Shark applicutter, the rotary cutter tool that's 14 millimeters. It's perfect for cutting freestyle style shapes. So it doesn't work with a ruler, it's just for this kind of thing. Hold it like a pen, not like a rotary cutter. And of course you could do this with scissors or probably even an 18 millimeter rotary cutter up to 28. But I like this because it's just going to allow me to take a nice, even, gradual arc along this applique shape, making it look really precisely cut. Did you see how I rolled through that like that? I'm also doing a little bit of navigation of the fabric piece with my left hand. So I'm slightly rotating it. So I'm actually kind of just pushing the shark forward. And that gave me now what you can see to be a very clean looking applique. So let's get these other 3 made real fast for us here. And we'll go ahead and anchor them down. Cutting in the smoothest stroke possible, whether that's scissors or a rotary cutter. And the other reason this works really well for this kind of pattern is our Cotton Couture, the Michael Miller high density solids, are just that. They're high density. And what does that really mean? It means it has a very heavy thread count, or excuse me, heavy is not the right word. It's a fine feeling fabric because we've got a nice fine yarn being used, but it's a dense thread count. So you notice you don't see a bunch of threads on the table and not a bunch of unraveling. A lot of times when us fusible applique artists, us, Heat and Bond or Wonder Under kind of fans, we want something like a batik or a high density solid so that the edges don't unravel, because this is going to now become a raw edge project. Now I'll encourage you when you're done to stitch right along the outside edge, maybe with a blanket stitch or a blind hem stitch, or you could at least just do a nice free motion quilting stitch along the edge of these. These are actually an orange peel shape. And what that would do is it'll hold it down permanently, because the Heat and Bond is only going to hold it down temporarily, but all of your quilt stitching will hold these shapes in position forever and ever. But you want them to be nice and cleanly cut so they look like they're actually patchwork instead of applique, which brings this whole block to the life, all the magic. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're just going to go ahead and peel off the paper. Just kind of grab a corner. As you peel back, you want to make sure you can see the glue staying on your pieces. And then I'm going to drop them down, and I'm just going to touch And I'm looking at them, we're doing them one at a time, and I'm touching corner to corner, right? I'm touching corner to corner here so that it looks perfectly placed in there. I'm going to drop that iron on it nice and flat like this, counting to 3, 2, 1 pretty quick, and lift off, and we've got it. Okay, with applique, you don't want to over iron it. That's going to cause that glue to cook, and it's going to go all the way into the fiber of the fabric because it's a woven, and then it won't actually hold as well. If that were to happen, you could hit it with a safety pin or a glue stick until you got there. Anchor, right? Point to point anchor. It's not difficult at all. You don't even really need to make sure the arches are working out because it happens just by going point to point. Point to point, point to point. I just love it. Okay, we'll do this one for you, and then I'll hold it up in a second to the last one, and we'll put it on the design wall. You can see that they're actually different shades coming together, which is really cool. It's going to be a subtle difference from block to block. It'll be a huge difference, as you saw on my digital rendering, from beginning to end. But it actually makes it more fun, actually a little more scrappy for those of you who like a scrappy project, even though you used up the perfect amount of coordinates. So I spilled water at the bottom, right? Spilled water and then right before you hold it up. But doesn't that look amazing? And it definitely looks patchwork. I'm looking at it across the room on a monitor or a camera. And then as I'm going to put it up, I'm going to put it out down here just so you can see the variety of different colors within, because I know sometimes the camera doesn't always translate all the richness of color, because you can see how much light is going on in this room to make myself look beautiful, so that I won't take my clothes off again. That was terrible. I'm so sorry for that, everybody, but I am glad to try to entertain you each and every week. Please join me here on Wednesdays. Make sure you're subscribed. Pretty soon I'm hitting the road. I'm going out to get a bunch more fun quilt shop tours done. We're gonna have a blast together, so stay tuned. We've got more sewing, we've got more shops, we've got more friends, we've got more tours, we've got more stuff at Making It Fun. We'll see you next time. Wow, you are still there. Thanks for sticking with me till the end of the video. I know, I get a little long-winded sometimes. But if you did enjoy today's video, make sure you check out a few of the other ones we've created. I think they're terrific. And of course, please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the little bell to be notified. I don't want you to miss a moment of the fun. Stay safe and happy sewing.